Thank you very much for this time together, and thanks to all the organizers who worked very hard to bring together these people and our conversation for such important concerns of our times. There's certainly no need to reiterate how challenging and difficult this era is on Earth and how difficult it's becoming. Predictions vary from very worrisome to catastrophic. I have a negative relationship with technology, just so you know. When we're talking about climate change processes, there are actually many players. There's the funders of research, there's the politics of the protocols, there's the energy giants, there's the civic groups, there's multi-layered agendas, there's competing interests, and there is shifting power. So climate change is a very political reality. And if, as suggests Canadian Ursula Franklin, that we are in a state of occupation by an army of marketeers, and our governments are puppets in the hands of corporations, then democracy is at great risk. And many predict that without functional democracies around the world, effective action against or adaptation to climate change will be impossible. And there's, of course, the famous quote of William Ruckelshaus and Henry Cadell: "Long before the systems of the planet buckle, democracy will disintegrate under the stress of ecological disasters and their social consequences." So Dr. Dahl has enlightened us on all the various threats. Optimism is a bit challenging. There was something this week I found equally interesting. There were 8 groups of evangelical Christians who downplayed the problems of climate change, and this included 6 organizations who have received $2.3 million in donations from ExxonMobil in the past year. So all that to say, when we talk about how to respond to climate change, it's a political, multi-layered field. And climate change is also cultural. We live in a sea of cultural ideologies that nurture notions of social well-being, but basically only in terms of progress and economic growth, unlimited materialism, and all of these contribute to climate disruptions. So climate change is already about economics, consumerism, resources for adaptations, disparities, and it's also an ethical and religious issue. So my job is to come in on the religious or spiritual side and say, what do we have to offer in terms of ethical frameworks or spirituality to climate change? And I'm going to offer 3 reflections for our conversation. But first, there are 3 caveats. 1, to say the word religion religions are many things. They're vast chronologically, they're vast in their diversity, and they're vast in their impact. Second caveat, there is no pure religion outside of historical forms, and religions have both constructive and destructive legacies. The best of religions are rarely embodied, and religions are fraught with bias, contradictions, and ambiguities. And the third caveat is that we simply cannot apply religion to climate change the way we would put on cream. So, here are my 3 reflections. And the first is about ethics, and within ethics I have 3 aspects. And the first is transformation of the self. Religious teachings are concerned about the interior human dynamics, such as desire. How do we educate and discipline our desires for power and for success, our greed, our desires for accumulation of wealth, and our appetite for more? Religions teach us to be aware of arrogance and ignorance. They teach us to understand the dynamics of our will and our thoughts and our fears, and even our insatiable quest for happiness. Religions teach about kindness and mindfulness. Buddhism teaches how to discipline the mind and the emotions such that we do no harm and that we develop compassion. Compassion is the ethical core of peace for a Buddhist. Religions also talk about regret and repentance and forgiveness. How do we mourn the losses? This is something religions, or the best of religions, can speak to. Religions speak about solidarity with others. My understanding of the Baha'i tradition, which is not a great deal, but what I know, the Baha'i tradition has much wisdom on this element of self-transformation. Confucian traditions call this cultivating interiority. It is my view that we need a great deal of depth and interiority to stand in front of this crisis and respond to it. So religions can become engaged in this cultivation of the self, this education of the whole person, all of which is needed to know how to intervene in climate change. Some traditions also teach of cultivating courage to oppose opposition, which is a second aspect of ethics I want to mention, social ethics. Complex problems such as those enmeshed with climate change cannot be solved at the personal level. We need social analyses. We need tools to perceive the ideological and political and economic aspects. We need tools to identify the cultural values behind climate change or within it, as Dr. Dahl mentioned. We need deep understandings of inequities, which are often systemic. And here there is a vast array of religious teachings on equity and justice, on attending to the common good, and most of our efforts should be addressed to those most marginalized. There are religious teachings on the need to assess public policy in terms of the impact of those who will benefit least. There are North American indigenous traditions who say that you can't consider any policy unless you understand its implications for 7 generations. Historically, religions have joined movements for progressive social change. Religions also can be prophetic. The liberation from oppression is a religious task, as is the confronting of oppressive systems and peoples and ideology. It takes enormous courage to be able to do this peacefully, to have the courage to confront oppression. So there are teachings and tools for nonviolent resistance. How do we work for peace? How do we put our life on the line? These liberation themes are certainly in Jewish, Christian, and Buddhist traditions, and undoubtedly others. And these traditions support both justice and democracy.